like my like I would say my mantra like throughout pregnancy was like just simply that birth can be great.
Mm.
You know, like birth
Yes, yes,
can be
yes.
beautiful. It can be orgasmic. Like I do believe
Yeah.
that, but birth can be pain-free. It doesn't have to be painful. So like these were the kinds of things like I just really wanted to convince my mind that it
Yes.
didn't have to be so terrifying and terrible, but I was also like preparing myself for because even positive birth stories, the
Mm.
range of experience of pain is so different and
Yes.
how long the birth is, like versus how quick, and sometimes quick isn't always better.
Mhm.
When I was pregnant, like I really like sought out birth stories myself. So, and
Mm.
I would say like a positive experience. So it's definitely something I've been wanting to share. So I'm really
Yes.
like for this opportunity to be able to do it.
Yeah. I love that. How did you find it seeking out birth stories before having your own kind of birth yourself? Did you find that it influenced how it went for you? How did that influence your experience, I guess?
Yeah, I think it completely influenced it for me. Because honestly, my whole life I've always been pretty much afraid of birth to the point where I didn't even ever want to have kids. Um, and then I'm sorry if you can hear like a little my baby in the background.
I can't hear
But
it.
oh good, okay. Yeah, so actually like a few years before I ever got pregnant, I read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth,
Mm.
and I recommend that to every pregnant woman because it starts with positive birth stories and then it goes into like physiological birth.
Beautiful.
But that I read that book and it was like a night and day. Like then I actually realized that I did want to have kids because the fear of childbirth was gone. And then
Yes.
when I was pregnant, then I continued to seek out positive birth stories in particular
Mm.
because I really believe like the mind-body connection. Sorry, okay.
It's all good. And if you need to pause at any point to tend to your baby, totally feel free to do that.
Oh, no. She's with her dad. She's fine. She's just like
Yeah.
she's 7 months old now and she's just starting
Oh,
to do her squealing and excited screams and stuff. But yeah, so
yeah.
I think positive birth stories are like, on one hand, there's like knowing how birth naturally happens, and that really supported me.
Mhm.
But and then on the other hand, I think like positive birth stories are like everything. Um it's important to know uh it's important to hear birth stories, good and bad. But I think
Mhm.
in particular there's like so much fear mongering. Even in your doctor's visits, like they're so focused on like what could go wrong. And I think
Yes.
like it's actually more common to have normal births, especially
Mm.
when they're like uninterrupted, as you know, being in the like free birth scene. But yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I mean, what you just shared just now with the fear mongering, I totally agree. That's part of what um uh allowed me or pushed me to have a free birth in the first place. Because even through the midwives, I was hearing that kind of narrative, and I could feel it influence how I felt about the whole thing. And that's when I decided to go into the free birth route. And it's very interesting that you share how you seeked out positive birth stories because I totally did that as well. My mom had very easy births, very easy pregnancies, and my pregnancy was going so well. And I was reading all about orgasmic birth and free birth and all that stuff. And for me, it actually influenced, I mean, it was all perfect, it was all meant to be. But for me, it influenced my birth in a quote unquote negative way. I don't want to say negative because it wasn't a negative experience, but what I was experiencing versus the stories that I had read were so drastically different that it created a sort of kind of resistance to to surrender in general and to the whole experience. But for you, you were sharing that like reading those positive stories influenced your own experience in a positive way, right?
I think it was like I didn't expect that I was gonna have like the same experience as them, but
Mm,
I think it influenced me in a positive way because it just like my like I would say my mantra like throughout pregnancy was like just simply that birth can be great.
mm.
You know, like birth
Yes, yes,
can be
yes.
beautiful. It can be orgasmic. Like I do believe that,
Mm,
but you know, birth can be pain-free. It doesn't have to be painful. So like these were the kinds of things like I just really wanted to convince my mind that it
yes.
didn't have to be so terrifying and terrible, but I was also like preparing myself for because even positive birth stories, they're
Mm,
the range of experience of pain is so different and
yes.
how long the birth is like versus how quick and sometimes quick isn't always better.
Hmm.
You know
Yes.
what I mean? So yeah, I think that's kind of how it influenced me. Like I wasn't like naive exactly like going into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and so what were your decisions then? Because this is your first baby, if I understand, you're 7 months old?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have an 8 months old, almost 8 months old upstairs. It's my first baby as well. Um, so because I mean, did you have a free birth first of all? Is that the route you kind of chose for yourself?
Not exactly. Yeah, no, I was looking into it because
Mm,
I wanted to have a home birth. So I knew that 100%. I did not want to be in the hospital. So I was asking around and it was like a really busy time for births. Like all of the doulas were kind of booked up in my area, but also
hmm.
because I'm about an hour away from the hospital. So my like midwife clinic that I was working with wouldn't come out here. And
Yes.
then and there's actually been some legal drama in like the free birth community out here. So I think
Yes,
even a
yes.
lot of people who would maybe consider attending my birth, because it was my first baby and for whatever
Hmm.
reason, sorry, no. But I
Hmm.
think for the best, I did have um what I ended up doing was having a home birth at my partner's house close to
Hmm.
town. So it was just 10 minutes away from the hospital. And then, yeah, we had their house set up all nicely for me to give birth there. And it worked out really beautifully. And then I worked with a midwife clinic. And so I had two midwives present
Nice.
at my birth and my boyfriend and my doula and myself.
Yes.
Next time, I think I would probably free birth, but with like a traditional birth attendant. Um,
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
beautiful. Um, and so tell me about the experience. Like, how was it for you, going into it? How was the experience itself? And maybe, I'll ask one question at a time, but I do have lots of questions, like how, because even postpartum, I mean, for me, postpartum has been such a transformative experience, right? It's like when you're pregnant, you're thinking about birthing, and it's like, it's this huge thing, which it is, but then there's like, after you give birth, it's a it's life changing in and of itself. You end up, with this little baby. Your first one, I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, even though I knew that like I had everything that I needed and it was in me and all of that. There's still a part of me that was like, oh my God, what do I do now? So, but before we get there,
Yeah.
tell me about the whole like birth experience. How was it for you? How did it change you? How was the experience versus your expectations, if you had any? Tell me about all that.
Okay. A couple things. Um, how it changed me, first of all, I think that just like I think like no matter what kind of birth you have, like this is like I had this really clear thought right after my baby came out, basically. I was like,
Mhm.
man, like birth is not for the faint of heart. And like, and it just occurred, I was like, wow, like I really understand why people get epidurals and even and I'm so glad I didn't, but and even elective
Mhm.
C-sections, right? I was like, I get it. Like, and so I think it's just I would say what really changed me about birth is like just how proud I felt after. And like it was like just the most amazing thing I've ever done. And that's also why I want to share my story, you know. It's like now it's been 7 months, so like it's been a little while, but um I just wanted to tell every single person that would listen about like everything. And I know that's not everyone's experience if you have like a difficult birth, but I still think that any kind of birth you have should be celebrated because it's just so huge. Um, so I think it like I just feel like stronger and like so capable now. And like I really felt too that this is maybe like I never really hear people talking about this, but I feel like birth does kind of prepare you for motherhood
Hmm.
because the contractions are so intense. And there are moments in motherhood where like everything's really overwhelming and you can't even get yourself a drink of water or go to the
Yeah.
bathroom or you know I feel like and then there's little moments of space like and I felt like that was something like to answer your second question, what was I like what was different than what I was expecting
Hmm.
is like those moments in between contractions. I was really focused on relaxing. And for
Hmm.
me, my labor happened pretty fast. Like I went straight into active labor. I didn't really experience early labor at all. So my
Yeah.
contractions were very intense, like right from the get-go. But those, even if it was only 30 seconds in between, like I was so focused on relaxing
Yes.
and and being grateful. And I feel like that same thing with motherhood, right? Like you have a moment to just chill,
Hmm.
maybe don't stress, maybe don't,
Yes.
try to, I mean, I do this all the time, try to like do all the dishes and clean the house, like, but
Yeah.
you know what I
Poop.
so I really felt like that experience is like this hyper focused like preparation.
I love that. Yeah, totally. I ended up hiring a traditional birth keeper, and so she's the one who attended my birth. And that's what she told me. She's like, use the moments between the contractions to rest. And my labor was about 20 hours, and it was literally within the last like hour. And I was in the nursery, I was like on the chair, I was kind of rocking myself like this, and I told her, I'm like, I think I finally get it, where I was actually allowing myself to rest in between the contractions and accepting that that was the experience of the moment, as opposed to being in my head about how long is this gonna last? This wasn't supposed to be this painful, like this like intensity in the body. And for me, there was also intensity in my mind. And towards the end of it, I told her, I'm like, I get it. Like the resting between the contractions. And I love what you're saying because it's so true. It's part of, for me, what felt overwhelming after giving birth was like, holy crap, you're always on. Before you had so much time for yourself, and after giving birth, you're always on shift, right? Like now you have this baby, you need to be on whenever the baby needs you. You need to be on all the time. And so you're right, having these little moments of rest, allowing yourself to fully be grateful for it, enjoy them, give yourself that moment as opposed to, and I totally do it too. It's like, oh, there's laundry to do, there's dishes to do, and am I going to start working out again? What is that going to look like? Like all of these things that you try to cram into the maybe 30 minutes that you have while baby naps. And I totally see how important it is to just allow yourself to have those moments for yourself so you can then show back up with your baby in a way that you're nourished, you're rested, you're whole, as much as you can be anyway in that moment. I really love that. Yeah. Was your birth fast? Because you said you started with the stronger contractions right away.
Yeah, yeah. Thank goodness my birth was really fast. And that's another thing. To answer your question of like what was different. I was totally just I was like, I'm getting ready for like a really long labor. Like, and I kind of had it in my head that I was like, okay, slow is good. Like I'm gonna like contract, I'm gonna open up like slowly. I'm going to try to just relax and just ease into it as much as possible. Even pushing, like I really wanted to have the experience of like what do they call it? Like the ejection reflex. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I was like, I'm just gonna like just relax and just let my body do its thing and take my time and just there's no rush, even if it's really hard, like, and that's because like most first time moms, I think, well, I shouldn't say most, but I think it is really common that like your first birth just lasts so much longer. So yeah, so that was something that really surprised me. My birth
Yeah.
being, I think it was 11 or 12 hours. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, I was having like period cramp kind of sensations for like a whole day before. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, my lower back seized up like 2 days before because the way the baby dropped in the pelvis was must have been pressing on a nerve. That's what my
Mm-hmm.
chiropractor told me later. And I
Yes.
couldn't at all for like 2 days. So
Wow.
was in early labor for those 2 days, but I just thought I was just at the end of my pregnancy. And like, you know, I thought I was just like finally at that point where I was like, this sucks. But
Yes.
then, but by the time I knew I was having contractions, yeah, I would say almost 12 hours. By the time I like, this is happening, and it was at like, I'd say like 9 p.m. or so, and then it was like they just ramped up. And around 10 or 11 p.m., I was having um a minute long contractions. They were 45 seconds to
Wow.
a minute long, and they were happening every minute or so, every minute and a half.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was like that was the point where, and my boyfriend and I, like, we didn't have the car packed. We weren't as
Mm.
ready as we should have been at this point. So we spent the next hour and a half packing up the car. And we had to drive an hour to get to town at like midnight. And then we got to our
Wow.
appointment at like almost 2 in the morning. And
Yes.
the baby came just before 8 in the morning.
Wow.
I was very lucky, but I do also I really strongly believe that like okay, like I'm I know um have a long birth, but I guess I do really believe that you can like there's so much of it that is mind over matter in a way.
Mm.
I'm sorry, it says my internet is unstable, so I hope it doesn't
Yeah, you cut out a little bit,
disappear
but I
from
think I got what you were saying. So, but can you rewind like just 20 seconds?
Oh, can I rewind 20 seconds? I just said that I do believe that there is so much that's mind over matter. Like I remember I was following this girl on YouTube, a working mama, I think her name is, and she's a doula. She's really good. And she talks about how
Mm.
birth is 80% mental and 20% physical. And I really
Yeah,
also like took that in. And but in the moment, there's not much thinking or anything you can really do. But I think just
totally.
before
Yeah.
I kind of prepared myself beforehand, I think that helped a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, yeah. N Now having gone through the experience, I can totally see that it is like mind over matter, mind over, yeah, matter mostly. Um, I was gonna say something else. Totally forgot. So gorgeous. So what was it like? So you went through the whole experience. Was it just you and your boyfriend and your two midwives and the doula, right? What was it like once when baby arrived? What was your experience in that moment?
Yeah. So so I just want to say that in BC, when you have a home birth, there has to be two midwives present. So when you're giving birth in the hospital, there's nursing staff, there's doctors, and then so there's one midwife present, and then whoever you want to be there. Where
Right.
in my case, that was kind of one of the stipulations, I guess, of having a home birth. And there's a lot of stipulations. So it's good to kind of be aware of all the different things that'll send you to the hospital. And they put shorter time limits on pushing, for instance, when you're having a
Mm.
home birth, because they want to give you time to be able to get to the hospital if something happens, right? So,
Mm.
yeah, so I mean, so the baby the baby coming out was amazing because I was
Mm.
actually crowning. So I didn't experience the whole like ring of fire thing that people talk about, but I think I had a lot of fear around pushing her out. They were
Mm.
like push, push, push as hard as you can. And I think she had to kind of get over a hump, to get out. And it was like I think I was a little bit like hesitant. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna hurt so bad.
Mm.
And so she was crowning for like I think a good half an hour, even longer maybe. Like
Wow.
she was like, and like they kept saying just one final push, just push with all your strength. And they said that
Mm.
so many times. Like, but the cool thing is when she finally came out, she came out
Mm.
all in one push. And
Amazing.
yeah, like her head and her body was just like psh, and it felt like I don't know about you. I've heard other people say this before too, that when the baby comes out, it doesn't even feel like anything after all of that. It just felt like a splash. It felt like just
Yes.
something jiggly coming out of me, It was like and I was just so amazed.
Yes.
And I think the euphoria kind of hit almost right away. I was just like, wow, this is amazing. But my birth, it was not ideal, like in some senses, and this is why I would probably have more of a free birth next time, because
Mm.
by the time I pushed her out, because I had been pushing for so long, like my pushing phase was
Mm.
really long. Um, and there was an ambulance present and two um what are they called? Sorry, people who drive the
Oh, yeah.
ambulance.
EMS, I forget. But I
Yeah,
know.
there's
Emergency medical something, yeah.
I I know I'm forgetting on the word, but there's two men there,
Mm.
ambulance drivers. Let's say there's the two midwives, my doula, my boyfriend. So I was on the bed, um, and then I had my doula and my boyfriend on the bed with me, and then they took the baby out and put her on my tummy. But there was a paramedic. That's what it's called. There was a
Yes, yes.
there was a paramedic standing right in the doorway. There was two midwives, and
Mm.
there was a very small bedroom that I was in. Like we had a room for the birth tub, and then they had like a second spare bedroom that I could use, right? But it like very small.
Mm.
I was on like a double bed and there wasn't very much room in the room. So all of these people are crammed in. I don't remember feeling self-conscious at all, even though I was
Mm.
flat on my back, like completely naked.
Yes.
I had extra blood loss at the end, so they were
Mm.
surprised with how much blood came out. And so I did end up going to the hospital like an hour later. They got us cleaned up and
Gotcha.
out. I had an overnight stay in the hospital.
Mm.
So that's why, like looking back, I would do things differently now. But in the moment, I was just thrilled. Like, I mean, I like I don't know, the joy, the euphoria. I felt like I can't even describe it. I've never felt it before.
Yeah.
Um, so happy. Well, also like I had a successful home birth, like I didn't have any drugs. She came
Yeah.
out really at home. So that was such a huge achievement. So
Mm.
having to stay in the hospital, I was fine with that.
Yes.
Because I avoided, C-section or anything else that could have resulted from going to the hospital. So
Mm.
and then I also felt in the moment too that the overnight stay in the hospital was also really nice because you do have people responding to your every need. That was really
Yeah.
nice. Ring a bell, like,
Yeah.
can you get more water or like anything? Like, can you take not that I would do this, but they offered to take your baby for a bit if you wanted to like sleep and stuff. And yeah, it was
Mm.
I forget what your question was. Oh yeah, when the baby came out, right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Uh, so I totally, and I love that. You're like, it was all perfect, and you're like, it was so nice to be tended to. What was the part of you that's like, that would do things differently next time with that? Would you have not preferred, but is that part of you is like, oh, I wish I could have stayed home and be in my element with, my boyfriend and my baby? What was that part of you that's like, I would do things differently next time?
Well, okay, so here's what happened to me. Like, so I explained that like the contractions came on really fast. I went straight into active labor. The whole first part of my birth story was pretty amazing. It felt, even though it was so intense, I mean, those contractions were like bringing me to my knees, and like my plan was to like relax through the contractions, like hypnobirthing kind of thing. And like,
Yes.
there's no way. There's absolutely no way. I mean, it's so intense, but um, and then we made it, in the car to my birth location. Um, and that was also like it's no fun being in a car. Like there's no way I was wearing a seatbelt, right? I was just like kneeling on the seat, like screaming in my boyfriend's ear. But it's so it was hard, but it was also like funny, we were laughing. It was and then
Hmm.
by the time I got to my birth location, she had my boyfriend's stepmom there. She had like salt lamps going. She had the house all heated. It was so warm. It was so comfy.
Yes.
So I just felt like I could just relax. So I was still having heavy contractions, but I was still hesitant to call my doula and my midwife because I'm just telling myself, like, this is my first birth. Like, they're sleeping for one thing. It's the middle of the night. I did text my doula a few hours before, but she just said, like, go to sleep. So at this point, she didn't even know that I was already like in town.
The place. Yeah.
And but when we were there, I feel like things slowed down slightly just because I was so relaxed. And even between contractions, I even slept for like 30 seconds, just micro sleeps, like between contractions.
Yes.
It was really cool. So the whole first part was just amazing. And
Hmm.
so we got there around 2 a.m. Jula got there around 4 a.m. And then even she kind of needs in like, okay, are you really in active labor or, because it is your first birth kind of thing. And I told her I have an urge to push. Like I've had an urge to push since I was in the car, She's like, okay, let's go sit you on the toilet. Also, another thing I want to say before that
Hmm.
is my contractions were not regular. Like everyone says they're
Hmm.
exactly a minute long every minute. And that
Yeah.
was not the case. They actually varied. I was having like um I would have a lighter contraction, not that any of them were light at this point, but they would get
Yeah.
more, say over the course of like four contractions, they would get more and more and more intense. And then the last
Hmm.
one would be intense, and then they would sort of, so it was, so even my doula had never seen that before. And she was like,
Hmm.
wasn't convinced that it was like real because it wasn't like spot on. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so anyway, so we went and sat on the toilet, and then I had this, well, I was having really heavy contractions on the toilet, and she was encouraging me to like push a little bit but not too much, just because you're supposed to wait until the midwives get there and they can like tell you when to push, which I
Yeah.
also just so and this is one of the things I just want to experience more spontaneous pushing next time, like
Hmm.
to wrap it up in a nutshell.
Yes.
But was we finally got the midwives on the phone because like everything was really intense, and it was like 4:30 in the morning at this point. So the midwife was like,
Hmm.
okay, like let me talk to Amanda and see how she's really doing. And then she was on speakerphone, and in that moment I had the really crazy contraction and I made a whole bunch of noise, and then my water broke right on the toilet.
Oh.
Yeah. It was so cool, but it was just such a perfect moment because
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
midwife was I'll be right there. Because she heard what happened.
Yeah.
So, and then she got there about half an hour later. We start filling up the birth tub, and she did a check and told me that, yeah, your baby's head is right there, like you're ready to push. Um, I did try doing a self check, like just on my own, like, but I didn't know what I was feeling, I thought I was feeling my cervix, but I was actually feeling the baby's head, you know.
I had the same experience when I did the self-check. I didn't know that it was the baby's head, but it definitely was.
Yeah. I guess you have to do a self check before you even dilate to like see what the difference
Makes
is.
sense.
It feels
Hmm.
like it's um so all of that to say that my entire experience changed when the midwives got there. Because,
Yes.
yeah, because I was just in so much like trust with like myself, my body, with the experience. I was having like
Hmm.
definitely a spiritual experience in the sense that I was like in gratitude and prayer, like between contractions. And I was just having this like
Hmm.
amazing experience. And
Yeah.
everything was just going along exactly as it should. And then I just when they got there, we were filling up the birth tub, and it was like the water has to be exactly to a degree. If it's a degree more or less, they won't let you get in the birth tub. So that was
Mm.
just really annoying. Like it was like
Yes.
waiting, and it was like, okay, the water's warm enough, like I could get in, but they're like, no, it's not safe for,
Hmm.
whatever. So, like literally
Yes.
1 degree, right? So it was like that. So,
Yeah.
and finally, when I got in the birth tub, they kept asking me to switch positions like every few contractions. And
Mm.
really when she got there, it was like, even though it was like because there was two midwives, so one of them was really positive, and she was like, um she was like, you're doing so great, wow, like, and that's how I was feeling. I was like, this is going so well, like I'm like so amazed.
Hmm.
And then the other one was so much more like, just wanting to measure everything as they're supposed to.
Yes. Yes,
um
yes.
so I felt like every single contraction was measured. And
Hmm.
she was right when I got in the birth tub, she was already telling me, like, okay, if you're pushing for, more than an hour or two, we're gonna have to call the ambulance, and you might want you're gonna
Hmm.
have to go to the hospital. Like, she's telling me all this stuff about what could happen, all this stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
and then so also I would say too, another um encouragement here for water birth, like for anyone who's looking for encouragement, because it really is amazing. Like they call it the
Yeah.
midwives Hospital, and I feel
Hmm.
like it really relaxed me so much. It just felt so good. Like I barely felt anything when I was in the warm water. It was just incredible.
Mm.
And so the
Yeah.
midwives, after I think I was in the tub for half an hour, 45 minutes. And so in my head, I'm telling myself, like, this is okay if it happens slowly, like, just take my time because my body's going to push the baby out eventually. Because I had
Yes.
been reading all about free birth, and like, this is more the mindset that I'm having, right? Like, this is natural,
Hmm.
it's going to happen. And then she's telling me, like, well, you kind of have to hurry up and stuff. And like, eventually she told
Hmm.
me, um, half an hour to 45 minutes in the tub, she said, this is too relaxing for you.
Oh,
And
wow.
she said, because it's your first birth, I think you need more like gravity, and like we need to get you out of the tub. And in the
Wow.
and like and my whole birth plan is like relax, just let it happen. Where in the moment I was not arguing with anything in the moment, right? I was just like,
Hmm.
okay, like that makes perfect sense, like, whatever. Where now looking back, like there's no way I would be like, sorry, no, I'm
Yes.
staying in the tub, like you're fine. I'll
Yeah.
call the ambulance if you want
Yes.
to, but I'm fine, like.
Hmm.
And but in the moment I was just like, sure. So we got out, we attempted like one squat push.
Hmm.
I was very uncomfortable because I had a person on either side of me, like sort of holding me up. And
Hmm.
we gave it good shot, you know? And so
Hmm.
that didn't work. Also, I think the midwife really just wanted a better view, you know, like because in the
Hmm.
tub you couldn't see anything. And so it was literally just one contraction later. She's like, you know, we need to get you on the bed. And
Hmm. Right.
so I tried one sideline push in bed.
Hmm.
That also was very uncomfortable. So I ended up on my back for, I guess it would be another like hour and a half from this point. And like I said, she was
Yeah.
crowned right there. If I had stayed in the tub, I think the baby coming out and pushing would have been so easy. Like I think it would have
Yes.
been because the pain relieving effect of being in the tub and like the I'm not even gonna say pain relieving because I wasn't really
Hmm.
experiencing everything as super painful. Um
Hmm.
it was but like the pressure, it like released all the pressure in my body.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's another thing I would do differently. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I guess you were really experiencing like the power of your presence and your intuition, and you knew exactly what to do, you knew exactly where to go, and the contrast between that and kind of what was happening externally, which in comparison to what's happening here is intense and kind of like external, kind of telling you like what you should do and what should happen, that was like in contradiction to what you were deeply knowing inside of you, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
in and of itself I find is like such a powerful experience to have, because you're right, and I totally share your experience of like a few things I share about what you shared. Number one, you shared that a while back, which is like, now I totally understand women who want to give birth in a hospital, they want to have an epidural. I totally had the same thoughts. I'm like, I get it. I get it. Like, I'm still so glad I didn't do it, and I don't want to do that next time. But I totally understand and respect that is some women's choices, 100%. Um, where was I going with that? I forget, but I think the gist of what I wanted to say is like that must be such a powerful experience in and of itself, having that experience of deep knowing and having that experience of like that deep intuition and knowing exactly what's right and what's good for you. And even though you might not have followed it to the degree that you wish you had, it's like it's more ingrained into you now that like your intuition is yours for a reason and it's right. Even though it might not make sense to the external world, even though it might not make sense to quote unquote professionals, you knew that that was what was right for you in the moment.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
is it sounds so funny to say, but it's so true. It is like having like a huge bowel movement. And I really think that's so true. Like, so it's like, how can anyone be in the room telling you how you should be positioned and how long this is going to take and what the best thing is for you when it's literally
Hmm.
a process that your body is going through? Like, you know,
Totally.
even
Yeah.
as a mother of a child, like I'm not gonna, you know, yeah, like we shouldn't need to be coached. I guess I
Hmm.
was to complete that thought, I was gonna say like having bowel movements, right? Like I'm not gonna tell her how to do it or how to
Yes.
sneeze, you know, it's like, yeah, and I think like it is like there's so much to be gained from birth stories and from learning like how it happens because it is such a huge thing and
Hmm.
it can go really sideways, but that's also like really rare that it does. Like it's more common that
Yes.
that birth happens exactly as it should, you know, like we digest our food, we
Mm.
like I said, we sneeze, we cough, like our body is going to give birth no matter what. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I totally share that view. And I had started actually, the first half of my pregnancy, I had hired midwives. The reading that I did prior to getting pregnant and all of that was, what's her name? Yolanda. I forget her
Oh
name, but
yeah.
she's like a huge advocate for free birth. And I read her book, which was really great, but she's really against like the medical industry. And so I didn't want that to influence me. I wanted to have my own experience. But going through the midwives, I totally felt I really wanted a relationship with the person that would attend my birth that was like a wise woman, that was like more, uh, I, I want to say authentic and genuine, not that, because my midwives were great. But I did feel that like kind of medical, almost like a medical wall a little bit, and I didn't get that like the connection that I was really looking for. I ended up hiring a wonderful, beautiful traditional birth worker that was amazing for me during my birth. I keep forgetting where I'm going with things today.
That's okay.
Um,
That's what birth is like, right? Like, I mean, that's the thing, and like the way that your brain changes when you become a mom, and
yes,
like what your brain does when you're in birth. It's like, I mean, I feel like we're talking about birth, so it makes perfect sense that it's like
my mind is going back there.
it's not a very like linear conversation. That's okay.
Totally. But yeah, I think all that I was saying is like, yeah, that's part of the reason why halfway through my pregnancy, I decided to let the midwives go. I hired this traditional birth keeper, because I really wanted to be able to trust my body. And when I was going to the visits and they were wanting me to do all these tests and they wanted me to do the gestational diabetes test, and I'm like, I don't feel that I need to do it, and they were telling me all the reasons why I should, and I didn't want that energy during my birth. And what ended up happening during my birth, I was so in my process. I honestly, everything else around me was kind of like falling away. Even my husband, like, what I knew my husband was next to me, but like, it didn't really even register in my system because I was so in my thing. But actually having this person here guide me, she drew a bath for me and then she brought me to the bath. I was in the bath for about an hour and a bit, and then she was like, "Why don't we get you to the bed?" Having her kind of like guide me, I actually really appreciated that. And now it's like, and I have a friend who gave birth also recently, so I've been listening to all these birth stories. You're my second podcast guest. I had somebody else a couple weeks ago share their birth story. It's so interesting how like every single birth story is so unique and so different, and I find really sets the tone for even postpartum, how postpartum goes, right? In that first little while, especially as a first time mama, it's been such a wild experience for me. Um, Share with me a little bit how your birth kind of influenced your postpartum phase and period.
Well, I think, like I said, I had so much like euphoria right after the baby came out, and even like my overnight stay in the hospital, I was getting poked with needles. I even got put under, like under
Oh,
anesthetic. They went in and took all the blood clots out of my uterus, and they were like, "Well,
oh,
you can do this awake if you want, but we don't have the right pain medication for you." And I was like, oh my gosh. You know what I gotta say too, like the being poked and prodded by people was
mhm.
way worse pain-wise than like my
Birth
contractions. And
itself.
contractions are intense. There's nothing like it. But as far as pain goes, like it was like,
Mhm.
when they like massage your uterus at the end, you probably didn't experience this, thankfully, but like, because they were trying to get my placenta out. So that hurts so bad. Like
Oh
it's
wow,
hard,
yeah.
like them touching the outside of your, stomach after that. It's like it hurts so bad. And then yeah, so
Mhm.
any um sorry, where I was going with that is that in the hospital, I was telling everyone who would listen about my birth story. Oh, I can't remember why I went
Mhm.
on a big tangent, but overall, I was in
Mhm.
such euphoria.
Mhm.
And so I think that it's true what people say about, like, I've been kind of um like I don't take drugs for anything. I've never really been into like pharmaceuticals and stuff. I've always tried to avoid it and
Mhm.
go the natural route. So I really do believe that there's so many side effects that come along with the drugs and stuff. So that's partly why I was avoiding that kind of birth. So I think it's
Mhm.
really hormonal cocktail that happens when you give birth naturally, and then when you're breastfeeding and your milk starts to come in.
Hmm.
It's a very
Yeah, that's
emotional.
intense.
I think like learning how to latch the baby in the first couple of weeks was definitely really hard.
Hmm.
I had some really difficult moments with that, of like my nipples hurting really bad, and then finally figuring out the latch. And I think they say it's like day 3 or 4 where there's some kind of big hormone drop, or maybe it's your milk coming in or something. I definitely experienced that. Um, sorry.
That's okay.
I definitely experienced some like big emotions at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do think like the breastfeeding and the, like just like having like skin to skin with your baby, lots of time with your baby. I
Hmm.
think all those things really worked. I think like I didn't have any bit of postpartum depression
Hmm.
that I
Yeah.
and I also really believed too, and I still believe this, like that there's so much emphasis on like postpartum depression and like avoiding it and like calling
Yeah.
your doctor if you have like any symptoms and stuff. But I feel like our culture is so
Hmm.
kind of like divided, and like we don't have like a village and a tribe. And I think it really is true
Yes.
that it takes a village to raise a child. So I think just like mentally preparing yourself and knowing that like of course it might be lonely because of the way we're living. And I live in a place where like I kind of live out in the woods. Like I don't even have a lot of close neighbors, and I live in a really small town, and my family lives an hour away, and my boyfriend's family is like an hour away in the other direction. And people don't come out here all the time because so
Mhm.
I definitely was um like alone for a lot of it. So I think my postpartum experience could have been better, but because I was so prepared and I was just so like kind of real with myself about what it was
Yeah.
gonna, what it was gonna be like, and kind of like I was so like kind of mentally prepared. Also, I'm in my
Yeah.
30s. I think I'm like totally ready to be a mom and to like make that sacrifice of like spending all my time with my
Yeah.
baby and stuff. And I think you just have to be like prepared for like the huge change that's gonna happen. And some days are really hard. Like I
Mhm.
really like keeping my house clean, and I really like being productive all the time. And you can't do those things. You have to focus on your baby more than anything else. Um, yeah, so I think so much. I think I had a pretty easy time overall. I would say it was positive.
Yeah.
I um enjoyed my experience, but yeah, I think it is lonely sometimes, it is hard. So
Mhm.
just
Yeah.
that's just how it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I totally believe like my experience with postpartum and having that like, hormonal drop, I totally, I was crying every day for like a week. I knew what was going on and the woman I hired was wonderful and she really, talked me through a bunch of it. But I totally understand how somebody who might not be prepared, and there's two things actually. Somebody who might not be prepared might be perceiving this moment as depression. I also think, and I believe that even with like, when you get your period and you might get emotional when you get your period, I totally believe that like being hormonal and having all of these experiences, it doesn't create anything that wasn't already inside of you. So the things that come up for you to feel, for you to experience, were already within you. So I totally went at it with the perspective of like, oh, this is like such a huge phase of growth where like these things are coming up to the surface for me to be able to look at them and to work through whatever I need to work through, if I need to work through anything. Sometimes it's just an emotion that is there to feel. Sometimes I just need to cry it out and that's all there is to it. But I totally see how somebody who might not be prepared might perceive that as depression. And I also think in our society, less now, I think there's a huge movement around like, allowing yourself to feel your emotions and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe that a lot of people don't have a lot of capacity for emotional experiences. And so when there's a lot of emotions, when there's like this sense of like overwhelm, there is a tendency to A, want a quick fix, and two, not having the capacity to be able to hold all of that. And so having the experience of kind of losing yourself through that emotional experience. And then of course it's, again, there's a huge emphasis of like postpartum depression and all that kind of stuff. So you have this easy label to go to that you can slap it on. Um, and I think that might be, I mean, I was very grateful to have this knowledge because I totally understand how you're right. Somebody with a loneliness, the not a lot of capacity for all of these emotions, not being prepared might be like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed, and then maybe go, to the route of taking antidepressants and things like that, which I personally feel like would take a lot longer to recover from if you're on that. I know it works really well for some people and everybody, does what they need to do and what works best for them, but it is such a unique experience, that postpartum period of, they say 3 months, but I mean, I still feel like I'm in postpartum right now.
Mhm. And I just realized too, like I didn't even say like I think what really defined my postpartum time is just like for me, because I've never really been around a lot of babies, to be honest.
Mm,
So I didn't have a lot of experience. I didn't realize I had no idea what I was getting myself into, really. I had no
yeah,
idea like how constant, how she would like literally always want to be held. Like always. And like how
totally.
often and you're up all night and like you kind of like people tell you this so you're like okay it's going to be hard and I yeah so I think learning like what a newborn needs and like the really boring stuff like how like looking at how much she's pooping and peeing and changing diapers and sort of like setting up your space so it works and are you going to pump and use bottles or are you just yeah so I think it sort of that sort of masks like any like even thinking about how I'm feeling you're just so focused on the baby um
Hmm.
but yeah, I'd say that really like is almost more so defines my postpartum. Like I feel like emotionally I felt so good because I was so proud and my baby was perfectly healthy. And so um
Mm.
yeah, and then it's just like, okay, I have a lot to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Last question I'd have for you is like, how like at this time in your life, how do you feel that the whole birth experience and postpartum experience, how do you feel that it changed you as a person today with like who you are today, I guess?
I have changed a lot. I think my whole focus has changed. Um yeah, like my whole focus is just all about my baby now. And I think like your brain really changes too, right? And like they show that how the woman's brain changes. I noticed this when I was pregnant and suddenly like they call it pregnancy brain, right? And suddenly you're like forgetting things and you can't like finish a sentence, you're not thinking as clearly, and that never goes away. So I think we I think when you become a mother, you have to like really let go of like you have to really embrace a new you, and I feel
Hmm.
like I said, like I'm in my 30s. I'm at the point where I was really, really wanting to be a mom and have a family. And so I was just like, bring it on. I would say like how it changed me is that I used to have a lot more like social anxiety. And I used to be
Mm.
kind of focused on that, like that. And then when I got pregnant and had her, so I kind of attribute this to like the actual brain changes, but and
Mm.
it's such a social experience, because you need people around you and suddenly you're going to be caring for your child. But for whatever
Yes.
reason, I became just like that whole part of my brain has shrunk down so much. And
Wow.
yeah, and so I've actually had really, I'd say really positive changes.
Hmm.
Like the negative changes are like I'm more forgetful now. My brain doesn't like I feel like my brain doesn't work as well as it used to in some ways. But I
Yeah.
be like I said, I noticed this in my pregnancy and it's continued, but like I feel so much more like happy-go-lucky. Like I feel like it's kind of funny, you know, I forget things, but I don't care. Where before I would like if I
Yes.
forgot something, I would be like I was so much more like perfectionistic. And then like I said, that like
Mm,
kind of anxiety piece too. So I'd be like, wouldn't want anyone to see that I made a mistake or something like that. And now I'm
yeah.
like I don't care about any of those things anymore. I don't really care um what people think so much, and let alone you don't even have time to think about what you're gonna wear or like doing your makeup and stuff like that. Like not that I ever really cared a whole lot about that,
Hmm.
um but just those things, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that. It sounds like there's a real sense of like self-acceptance.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Self-acceptance and also just self like yeah, there's a few things to it, like self-confidence, and then also like because like having actually birthed the baby and like doing all that stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and like sticking, like being true to myself, even though I didn't have a free birth, I
Hmm.
still like stuck true to like what I really believed, and like I trusted my intuition over, what the medical experts were trying to tell me. I was like, no, I really
Yes.
believe that this can be like natural and stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and then Oh, I had a third thing I was gonna say, but that's okay. I forgot.
Beautiful. Um, yeah. So you're planning to have more kids then?
I would like to, yeah, but I'm not
Okay.
like I don't even feel remotely ready at all right now. But
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So my little one is 8 months old. I wanted three children. And after having my little one, I want two.
yeah,
Just for the simple fact that, I got to realize after giving birth that like being a mom, it's a full-time job and I love it and I'm so grateful for it. And there's still things that I want to do with my life. There's still like, I still have plans for, where I want to take my business. Also something that I wasn't prepared for that I got to learn through is like the relationship with your partner changes significantly after you have a baby, right? Like now all of a sudden, prioritizing quality time, it becomes something we have to schedule in. There's like all of these, it changed our relationship in a beautiful way because we had to be so much more clear with our communication. We had to be more clear with our needs and being able to communicate that with one another. Um, we had to become better at relying on one another, right? Which before having a child, there wasn't that sense of like needing to rely on the other. Uh, yeah, but anyway, so I wanted three, now I want two because there's this whole aspect of um just not wanting to be just a mom. For me personally, that's been my experience. Um, so anyways, all that to say that I can relate to not being ready. My little one is 8 months old. I do want a second one. And that's something that's funny as well is during my birth process and experience, I remember this moment telling myself that I totally understood women who wanted to, go to the hospital, have an epidural, and there was this thought that was like, there's no way I can do this again. In the middle of like the really hard contractions, I remember having this thought, there's no way that I can do this again. Now being here now, I'm actually looking forward to doing it again. I'm excited for it, but I am nowhere near ready. My little one is going to be 8 months on the 9th of January. And yeah, we're nowhere near ready, but soonish though we'll be getting there. So all that to say that I relate to not being ready yet at this point of postpartum.
yeah. Like what you were saying about like the relationship changes and wanting to
Mm,
have more. It kind of I feel like it's nature's like perfect sort of like birth control and like knowing
totally.
you didn't really touch on this, but like for me, there was definitely like a huge loss of libido that I was like not
Mm,
expecting at. And also I just like
totally.
stayed comfortable down there for like so long. And
Yes.
7 months postpartum now, and I'm still not fully there yet, but it's starting to come back. But I
Yeah.
think that's also nature's perfect kind of like, like sex is to like procreate. So it's like it makes perfect sense that if the hormones that are triggered by the breast milk are reducing your libido and all this stuff. So I'm kind of like trusting that too. Like I think my body will tell me when I'm ready to have more kids. Not that I want to
Yes.
like
Yeah, yeah.
have my libido back, you know what I mean? But
Yes.
um um yeah, like it's kind of perfect that way.
Yeah,
I
totally.
have I would sort of joke that I wanted to have like just a whole bunch of kids, like 5 to 10. Because when they get older, they all kind of help each other out and like it gets easier. Like I've heard people say that before. It gets easier when you have actually like once you have like four. Anyway, now that I've had one, I cannot even imagine how people have two. Like it really just my brain
Yeah,
make any sense of that. So, but I want to have at
totally.
least like,
Yeah, yeah, it's so interesting because I mean, there like Yolanda, for example, she has like 8 kids or whatever. I follow this other lady. She's got, I think, 8 to 9 kids as well. Um, and I mean, I know a few people who have come from large families, and from what I hear, like I've always heard that people love it. They're like, I love coming from a big family. There was always a lot going on, and I totally love that and respect that. And it won't be my experience.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm like, how do people have twins or let alone triplets? It must be like you really need a village at that point. You really do. Yeah, gorgeous. Um, Beautiful. Is there anything else that feels really important, relevant about either the story or your experience of it, that feels important to share?
I mean, I think we covered so much of it. I think that like just my mantra that I shared earlier, like I'll repeat that like well actually it's sort of like a fill in the blank, right? It's like birth can be amazing. And like I kept telling myself that. And like birth can be beautiful and it can, and I think that's just if anyone is listening to this and they have a fear of childbirth, like get educated, like figure out like what it is that is
Mm,
scaring you. Are you scared that you're going to tear? Are you scared
mm,
of the hospitals and the medical system like I was? Are you scared of like having like are you scared of yourself and how much it's going to hurt? Are you scared of the pain? Because um there's lots of videos out there, there's books about like pain in childbirth. Um, I went crazy. I wouldn't expect anyone to research as much as I did, but sorry. But
That's
like I
okay.
how to avoid every single intervention out there. But there's so much you can do, and I don't think people should get overwhelmed. But at the same time, you do have 9 months to prepare. And if you don't have nine
Mm,
months, you have at least a few months or a few weeks to prepare. And there's a lot you can do. I think
mm,
um downloading the Ina May's Guide to Childbirth audiobook and listening to that, like because the whole first part of it is filled with positive birth stories. I also
yes.
listened to Supernatural Childbirth by Jackie Mize,
Mm,
which is scripture based, so it's very like biblical Christian, like it might not be for everyone, but that really just the mental aspect for me, that just completely convinced me that I could sort of
mm,
mentally guide how my birth could go. And
I love that.
yeah, I just really want to encourage people that like it doesn't have to be terrible and it can
Mm,
even be amazing and like and that you actually have so much power, but you do have to
mm,
like take that power. You do have to like take responsibility and set up your birth
mm.
plan, do all of this stuff to prepare because unfortunately our society is not really helping you get there. So you have to get there
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. I love that. So it's like if I could like take a snippet and use it as a title from all that you just shared is like don't let your fear stop you from having an amazing birth experience. And what you're sharing is like don't ignore your fear, but use it. Like what are you afraid of? Go get educated so that can be out of the way so you can actually have a beautiful birth experience.
Exactly. And then you might
Yeah.
still be like a little bit afraid of tearing, for example, but if you know all of these things you can do to prevent it, you know what I mean? It's like you might be afraid of getting in a car accident, but if you're a really careful driver, it's very unlikely. There's a lot of things you can
Hmm.
do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. Gorgeous. Well, thank you so much for like taking a chance and showing up on this totally random call from this random post that I posted. I'm really glad you did.
I'm
Thank
so
you
grateful.
for,
Sorry.
yeah. No, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for being willing to be vulnerable and sharing about, such a personal experience. I totally believe that birth experiences and stories are so important, and I feel honored to have received your story, heard it, and to be able to share it. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I'll post the links to the books below as well that you talked about. And I will send you a link whenever I post this, probably in the next couple of weeks.
Awesome. I really look forward to it. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. So nice to meet you, Amanda.
You. Hey, take care.
You
Bye.
too. Bye.